Can you hear me now?
Now I can. Thank you.
All right, good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you today?
Good, thank you. I don't know if we're gonna have a couple other people. Wait a minute. So what was our last section? Working with buyers and sellers? That was the last one? Okay, what was that all about? Ah, who was
It
this?
was kind of like a reiteration of what we've done, just put it together.
There's like a combo between
Yeah.
the buyers and women stuff.
Yeah, like how to connect one and how to connect the other.
Who taught it? I was glad they left an impression.
Fred.
The last one I was at was Fred did it.
Okay.
Oh, Fred, yeah, Fred.
Fred did, okay. So what did you get out of that? It was just more of a,
It was, it was a lot about relationship building,
okay,
connecting with the person
okay.
and learning what makes you different from other people and how you're gonna connect.
The 3 levels of service: purpose, value proposition,
Yeah.
and fiduciary.
Wow,
Take my notes.
no, that's good, right?
Three.
We should have a purpose, like I go to intention, so. The question about door knocking. So if I were to say you want to do door knocking, what's your intention? Say what? What's your intention to door knock?
To help people to see if they have anybody that they know that wants to buy or sell, or
Right?
If they're interested in that particular house, or can I help them find another property?
So think about what was just said. If my intention is to, see if I can get a listing or see if they want to do something.
Mhm.
How do you think that comes out when you're knocking on the door? Compared to if your only intention was to meet people? What if your intention was different when you door knock?
yeah, that's true. Then people would be more relaxed, they'd be like, oh, okay, nice to meet you,
Yeah, and that's why we changed our script a little bit to be more of a survey.
Mhm.
Because I don't really, so I'm the guy, if you knock on my door in my neighborhood, I don't tell you I'm real estate. I'm just that way, so I wanna hear the pitch.
Yeah.
Right? And it is, it's interesting, so like, I understand the goal,
Yeah.
but if your intention is the goal, it comes out sometimes.
Mm.
So it doesn't matter if you're door knocking, doing open houses, phone calls, there's a little timing involved in this business, right?
Yeah.
Getting people at the right time.
Yeah.
Do you tell them at the end of the
Oh, yeah.
conversation?
Yeah.
After their
Yeah, I'll do this, but it's the same when I go to open.
Like 2 years later.
Yeah.
You
No,
know.
when I go to open houses, it's the same, I
Yeah.
don't walk in and go, here's my card.
No.
So I really, cause I learned from it, I'm not trying to judge, I'm genuinely curious, and I've seen it all,
Yeah.
it's just really, so that goes back to the intention. So, okay, so then the third part of what Nene said, which is fiduciary. Just a trick question for you guys. So you're at an open house, you're holding an open house, it's not your listing. And you don't have a buyer broker agreement signed, where's your fiduciary?
To the sun.
To the seller,
Yeah.
right? So it would be the same, so if we had a listing and you called Tammy and you said, hey. I see you have a listing, can I do an open house for you? One of the first questions she's gonna ask you is, what's your intention?
Mhm.
So then what would you say to that,
To sell the house.
right? So that's how we,
Yeah.
so if you say, I wanna get buyer leads, if you say any of those things,
I see what you mean.
you're not getting it.
No,
Right.
because we need to help you guys sell the house.
That's-
Yeah.
I have a responsibility, you have a fiduciary, whether you like it or not.
Right.
But back to intention, my intention is to sell this house, and if I find that a buyer doesn't like this house,
Right.
I have full, right, discretion to try and earn their business.
Right.
That's
That's it, yeah.
yeah. Good stuff, because it's, I do feel that how you think internally, what you're trying to achieve is a direct result of your conversations with people. That could be good or bad.
Yeah.
Which is why I encourage when people ask you how the market is, you say, that's a great question, why do you ask? Because if you're telling me how great things are and I'm in foreclosure, I'm not gonna tell you I'm in foreclosure.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it just blocked off that avenue,
Yep, so,
yeah.
okay, so we're gonna get going. Sounds like you guys can hear me okay, which is great. We're gonna get through all the disclaimer stuff. And then, holy moly, you guys are almost done. Wow, look at that. So we have
It's been,
today, negotiate,
interesting.
get to close, plan your future. Why has it been interesting? Because it's a lot.
because, it just, it's been a few weeks, and it's been really, what's been great more in me, it's like the relationship part of the business as opposed to more of the transactional part.
Yep,
It's been very people oriented and how do you like get through people and
Yep.
walk them through the process and make
so,
a deal out of that.
so a couple of you were here when I taught on Monday or Tuesday, whatever day that was. So we were talking about win with sellers, remember? And I gave you guys a couple tasks or homework assignments,
Yeah,
Was
oh,
it?
God, no.
right? And just so everybody else knows, the idea,
Oh, yeah.
win with buyers, win with sellers, is to start working on your buyer presentation, your seller presentations, right? That stuff, so. And one of the reasons that's important is because it helps you understand the process a little bit more. That's what we're gonna talk a little bit today about the offer process. So the fundamentals of real estate really don't change, right? You need a buyer and a seller to agree on something.
Mhm.
That's typically managed and facilitated through contracts. And then depending on your brokerage in your state that you're in, there is additional paperwork, right?
Mhm.
Forms, addendums, all of those things. And it's changed significantly. It's probably really for the better, even though it might not sound like it. This sounds really, I hate dating myself, but when I started in real estate, we had a 1-page purchase contract. It was 8.5 by 14, so legal size.
Yeah.
And there was 3 copies. There was a white, yellow, and a pink copy. But you had to handwrite everything that you guys had a checkbox for.
Right, yeah.
So it's, I could say it's a little better, even
Yeah.
though there's boilerplate in there now that most of us don't read or know how to explain, right? So today we're gonna spend some time really on the offer process all the way down to figuring out at least how we're gonna get across the finish line and respond to some things. So this is kind of what we want to concentrate on. And this is what I was afraid of. Trying to maneuver all of this. I can hide this, right? Hide
Yes.
loading controls. We'll at least do that. So what this doesn't show is you have to have a house available for sale, right? Okay, so we're just gonna assume that we have a house available for sale and the buyer is gonna want to make some type of an offer. Now, to be fair, this can be done actually a couple different ways at the beginning. You could be with a buyer, as an example, who, maybe they're really big on negotiating, maybe they're not, but the point would be, hey, before we write an offer, would you do me a favor and call the listing agent and ask them if they would take this? Okay, so there's some things that might happen along the way. The question would be, how should you handle it? So let's just talk there, because I think you're going to run into people who want to fish, nibble, right? So how if I said, hey, I really want to write an offer on the house, but before you do that, would you mind calling the listing agent to see if they would take $950,000? So what's the best way to approach that? You're the agent.
Best to ask, because you have your fiduciary duty to your seller. If you say yes, then you're gonna.
Let's
give away
pretend we have a buyer broker agreement.
I'm the agent to the.
You're the
buyer,
agent, I'm the buyer.
and the buyer's
We
agent.
have an exclusive buyer's agreement. We found a property that we want to write an offer on. Before I have you write the offer, though, I would like you to reach out to the listing agent and see if they'll take $950.
I wouldn't say necessarily, I wouldn't call to say, you can't take my 50, I wouldn't do that. I would probably speak to my buyer and say, okay, why do you want to contact them, and why do you want to see that? Because it could
Well,
backfire.
before we waste each other's time with writing an offer, I'll see if they're interested. So let's say
Okay.
it's listed for $1 million. I want to write an offer for 950,000, and I have a buyer rep agreement signed, so where's your fiduciary?
I would
Right.
definitely call, but I wouldn't ask them that. I would call the seller and say,
The listing.
the listing agent and say if they've had any other offers and. the
Well, we're gonna get
motivation
to
of the
that.
seller.
We're gonna get to that. Right
That's
now,
for
we're
the
just talking
motivation of the
about,
seller.
we're talking about making an offer.
I would call them but I'd phrase it in a different way, kind of way.
But I'm asking how you handle the conversation with the buyer. I'm not really worried about calling the listing agent.
Okay.
I'm asking you,
I
what do
would
you
take it
think
as
is
an I
best?
would take it as an opportunity to look at my buyers,
Okay,
perspective of motivation and the
Sure.
whole thing.
okay. So the
I wouldn't say no.
okay, the trick question is, can you make it work?
You
can.
can, but. it's not-
Absolutely, the question is it enforceable? All right, so it's hard to get somebody to sign something verbally. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But this is still an objection. So I just want you to be okay that it's still okay. It's understanding what are the ramifications. So Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if I did that verbally. And what if they verbally agreed to it? But by the time we got the offer in front of them, they changed their mind.
Right.
Are you with me?
Yeah.
So what I want you to help, what I want to help guide you on is understanding the process in a little bit different way. Because we look at things functionally. So we know there's an offer that needs to be
Yeah.
signed.
Yeah.
That's the functional side. It's
Yeah.
more of what are the hypothetical things that could potentially get in the way?
So it's always best to have it writing.
I prefer
Yeah.
that you find a way and say, I appreciate that. I still don't mind having a phone call. But what if?
Yeah.
Right? What if we could get them to sign something? Wouldn't that be best? That's just that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So at some point, some way or another, we're making an offer. The seller is gonna typically respond in one of three ways. They counter the offer, which leads to more negotiation. They accept the offer, which puts us in a position to move forward, an open escrow, right? Begin the closing contract, right? Or they reject the offer. And then where does that put you? So these are great things because when we teach the negotiating class, right, these are what we call bat now. This is what are the what ifs that could potentially happen? What's the most common of?
Counter.
Why is that?
Because the seller's gonna come back, if they don't like what the buyer's offering, they're gonna come back with another price, and then you meet in the middle.
But what if they like the price? Can they still counter?
Yeah,
What can they counter?
terms or repairs.
Well, no, you haven't done repairs yet.
That's what they are.
So they could counter the terms, any of the terms. It could be dates, deadlines, it could be paying for escrow and title, concessions, who knows, whatever it is that you put in the offer, right? So is it a good thing to be in a counter offer scenario?
Yes.
It's still a good thing, right? That means the door is open. We're
Yeah.
still in the process of figuring out how to get two people to come together, right? If they accept the offer, is that good? Is that a
Yes.
red flag?
Depends on the offer.
Well, how could you, if countering is the most common, how could you get to writing such a good offer that they just accept?
That's
It
right.
goes back to
Desperate.
it goes back to where you were originally going is, I was having a great conversation with the listing agent. And we were verbally going back and forth on what's important to the seller so that I could make my offer as clean as possible. Nothing wrong with any of those two. The third one is kind of hard to recover from, right? It's the rejecting of whatever it is that you sent in. So nothing really changes with the offer process other than where you are and how much of the terms that you're gonna have to clean up. Now, again, this can be something that happens quickly, meaning your buyer is sitting right next to you, the seller happens to be sitting next to the listing agent, and all the stars are aligning. Or it could be, well, I got your offer, Joel, but the sellers are on a cruise and I'm not gonna be able to talk to them until Saturday evening. Well, but Brandon, you just said offers are due today.
Yeah.
This is what we're gonna have to deal
Yeah,
with, right?
yeah.
So it is what it is, but this is the normal process, and there can be things that kind of get in the way of all of this collectively. So those are your three main options. Memorize it, understand it, because this is gonna be really important for you. I don't know why we just went to ahas, but we have ahas. Preparing to write an offer, I think, is super critical on a lot of different levels. So, what kind of research do we want? What are the things that we want to know before we write an offer? Well, number one, it says to make sure that the property is still available. That to me is kind of like a duh, except not every listing agent tells you what's going on,
Yeah.
right? Just because it's active in the MLS doesn't mean that they just didn't accept an offer.
Mhm.
So it is actually really important to make sure that the property is still available, right? How can we build rapport with the listing agent? Those are things that are critical. And again, you're at the mercy of a few things. Is the listing agent communicative? Are they collaborative? Are they completely missing in action? There's a lot of different things that play. So what we're kind of doing is we're trying to say, best case scenario, if we have an opportunity to do these things, this is what we want to do. What does inquire about activity mean? What do you really want to know?
How many offers?
Could be that. What else?
Um, How many people have seen it?
Sure. That's
So
a
people
that's
are
a trick
calling to
one.
us for the house.
Sure. What I think Tammy's favorite question literally is what kind of activity are you getting?
Yeah,
And she keeps it loose, a little open-ended,
yeah.
to see, right, what kind of direction that the listing agent is offering information. How else could you, without talking to the listing agent, how could you inquire about activity?
And all this,
Like what, how?
the days on market.
Okay, you do days on market. If you click on calendar days on market, let's say it says, total days on market 10. It doesn't sound like a lot, right?
Yeah,
But what if you clicked it and in that 10 days, they had 2 price reductions or it pended 2 different times and came back on the market? Is that telling you what kind of activity is going on,
mhm,
right? So there's one aspect of uncovering some information.
yeah.
What other ways could you try and identify the activity on a property? Think a really big company that most agents really love,
Zillow.
Zillow. So what does that mean? How do we figure out activity on Zillow?
You click on the property,
Okay,
click on the address of the property,
and do what? What are you looking for?
looking for activity. If people have asked for agents.
Or how many likes or how many views?
That's exactly right. So whether it's Redfin, Realtor.com, any of those, people that are liking the property or favoriting the property, all of that is giving you some kind of idea. Now, that's another nugget I would give you for a listing agent. If you're a listing agent, that's what Tammy does. She gives a report. She gives a report weekly to the seller. This is how many people are looking, this is how many people are favoriting it, right? So inquiry about activity. Number 4, inquire about other offers on the property, which is what you said, Mimi. Why did they fall through? Right? Sometimes you'll say, well, it's no fault of the seller. And that could be true in a lot of different circumstances. So again, if we have a really collaborative, great listing agent who's communicating, man, it's really important to gather as much of that information as you possibly can. Ask questions about seller motivations and their needs. What does that sound like?
When do they need to move?
Okay, when do they need to move by? Yep. Why is that important?
Because you can negotiate it not on price, on terms.
Sure. Yeah, you might be able, depending on what your buyer is willing to do or not do, you might be able to find a way to cater, right? To the seller needs. What else? About seller motivations is important. Are you guys hired? If you were a seller, what kinds of things are important to you?
The time frame, the price,
Okay,
and who, Not necessarily who's buying it, but just.
Okay, what do you think the number one thing that if you're representing buyers, number one thing you probably really need to know about the seller? Motivation, right? But what part of the motivation?
Why are they selling?
I need the money. It's where they're going.
Yeah.
So always ask the question, do they know where they're going? Right? Because if they haven't figured out where they're going, what are the chances they're gonna maybe take your terms and
Right,
conditions?
because
We don't-
they don't have anywhere to go.
Right? What else is important about that they don't know where they're going?
If they need to stay in the house.
Well, they might include in their counteroffer that it's subject to them finding another house.
Right.
So now you have this contingency, but your buyer just gave notice where they're leaving. And they need a home in 30 days. They don't want to play that game, right? So that would be another reason. What else?
But wouldn't that be listed on the MLS, it's contingent on them finding a property?
So do you know every agent in the world does their job perfectly well and they communicate everything? Right, which is why we have to ask the question. Even if it's active on the MLS, you still need to say, is the property still available?
Mhm.
Because they might have just accepted an offer, their TC or their admin or their VA hasn't gotten around to it, who knows? Right, so I know it sounds like a little redundant, but we are trying to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, but gotta be careful. All right, so back to motivations, right? So if I said, yeah, they know where they're moving to,
Uh-huh.
how should we clarify that? What's the next follow-up question? Yep, they're moving to Phoenix. What's a good follow-up question?
Did they find their house?
Did they put any money down on their replacement house? Don't even say, did they find it?
Okay,
Because I look at property all day long.
right,
I found a lot of things.
yeah, but
Am I committed to it? Right, that's what I want
did they
to
put
know.
a deposit down?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What other potential motivations would be important?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So last year I had a client that was looking for property and, I had to contact a few listing agents. And a lot of these listings agents don't want to say nothing and they kind of bully you. They
can.
kind of fall into that point where they don't want to be asked anything. And if they
Right.
do, they kind of take it like the wrong way. How do you like break that or what do you do for that?
So
Because they
what's-
don't want to say nothing about themselves.
What's number two?
Build rapport. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So-
So how do you build
Well,
rapport with
that's
somebody that's kind of bullying you into not saying nothing?
so this just has to be a little bit of your character and your intention. So if my intention is to just jump to number three instead of number two,
Mhm.
then that's the missed opportunity, right? So how do you typically break ice with somebody that you meet for the first time? What are
Oh,
some
I
things you
just compliment on something.
Okay. do? So.
Findings and
So, wait, no, just take exactly that. So now use that, I'm the listing agent, you call me and use that as your icebreaker,
Yeah, say, oh, well, the property is beautiful.
okay?
It's a great property.
Okay, there you go, that's one way, or congratulations on your listing.
Yeah,
It's a tough
Okay,
market,
okay.
wow, that's awesome, how did you do it? Yeah, you're 100% right, that's the building rapport. And that's why I like doing open houses, because I always find a way to break the ice and not talk business, right? So great question, and that's why that's number two, right? Is what can we do? Is there anything similar? Do they work at another KW office? Do they not? This goes back to before you even picked up the phone. Did you stalk them on Facebook or anything? What things could you gather to put you in a better position to have a great conversation? Right?
because they have a lot of influence over the sellers.
Sure. Well, we hope. Yeah. But to Jules' point, some listing agents feel like they're the decision maker.
Yeah,
And so you have to find a way to not have a confrontation with them, right?
yeah,
Okay, so seller motivations, how quickly do they need to be there? Is there anything important to the seller that I should convey to my buyer that would help? Like, those are just nice, subtle little questions, right? There are sellers who are like, wow, I really know I need to sell, I want to sell, but I have all this stuff and I don't know how to get rid of it. Right, so there are breadcrumb trails if you're asking questions, right? Number 6, I think is really important. And there's a couple different ways you can do this, and that's really finding out from the listing agent what's the best way to present an offer to them. So sometimes they have, and I think the place you should start is the private agent remarks in the MLS. So a lot of more professional listing agents will put instructions on what they want you to do and how they want you to submit their offers. And in the MLS, if you didn't know this, there's a place for a listing agent to include supplements or documents. So if you, next time you go through the MLS and you're looking at property, look for the supplements button.
Where is it
There's
at?
attachments. So it would be right above the first photo. Okay, it would be right above the first photo if they do. And so like what Tammy will do is say, please see attached supplements for offer instructions. And there might be a cover letter that says, these are the things that are important to the seller. If they're not important to your buyer, don't bother writing an offer. It can be abrasive like that, or it could be a little bit more simple, like, whereas offers are due by such and such date, seller is gonna review them on such and such date. They're not gonna do a highest and best or a multiple offer, they're just gonna pick the best offer, like, however it is, right? So that's what we wanna do. So if we've got them on the phone, we wanna make sure that we're catering to their needs, right? So a pet peeve of mine is I don't want you to submit an offer to us with all of the documentation on one PDF. I want the contract separate, I want their pre-approval separate, I want the proof of funds separate, I want their love letter or whatever it is, I want all of that separate. Because I don't want to scroll through 100 pages to find what it is I'm looking for. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So making sure you have a good understanding of that. Number 7 is, right, if your buyer is getting a loan, you know, we can talk about this a little bit if you want. I don't really know that there's a difference between a pre-approval letter and a pre-qualification letter. What I do know is that a lot of lenders use the terminology in a different way. For me, I want the buyer to be as far enough along in the process as possible. Preferred method for us is direct underwriting. So what is direct underwriting?
They've had a full report on their financial.
Well, they've been fully underwritten. And there's only 2 things they're missing. A house and an appraisal. And they can close in 21 days. So that there's a benefit, right, to that. So, but making sure you have it. Now, what's missing here that I would add is proof of funds. I don't care if your buyer is putting 3% down, 3.5% down, 10% down. I would make that a standard practice moving forward, because if I'm the listing agent, I'm gonna ask you for it. So it's also a good qualifier for your buyer. Your buyer, right? They want you to spend time and money and help them with the property. And even though they have a pre-approval letter from your favorite lender, what proof do you have that they can close? It's a good qualifier, right? So if I'm gonna work with you, and we're gonna sign an agreement to work together, I need to know that you can fulfill your end of the bargain. Right? So before you got married, right, you had a P&L, you asked for a copy of the bank statement. Okay,
You make sure of that.
right. So that's what number 7 means. Number 8 is review the MLS and tax records. What are we trying to figure out there?
There's any liens on it?
Well, the tax records or the MLS is not gonna show you the liens. They might show you
You
what
want
their
to make sure
original
that
was.
house belongs to them?
Yes, let's start at the top. Have you guys seen the tax record?
Yeah. It's on title.
So we want to see who's on title. Why is that important?
Make sure you're getting the right seller there.
Well, right, and there is a process through our zip forms where it auto-populates some things, right? And it might auto-populate the wrong thing. So what are some reasons why the name on title could be important?
Because you want all the decision makers to be there.
Right.
Should be, because.
Could the tax records be wrong?
Yeah,
right?
In a
Do
way.
people get married? Do
Yeah,
people get divorced?
yeah,
Do people live together in community property, right? All of these things, could it be in the name of an entity, the
yeah.
name of a trust, right? Okay, so that's the top part. What else do we want to maybe notice while we're there? What's the next thing under the name of the owner? It's their mailing address. So does the mailing address match the property address? So why is that important?
Is it, they live out of state?
Yeah, do we have to worry about tenants? Is the house going to be ordered vacant?
Yeah.
Right? Does the tax record match the MLS? Let's go there. What's next on the tax record? It's the property information. So the MLS says 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, but the tax record says 3 bedroom, 1 bath. Is that-
So the tax record would be right in that scenario, right?
No.
Wouldn't it be the MLS?
No. Tax record is not always right. But that's showing you there's a discrepancy, right? And what we're trying to do is ask good questions before we submit an offer. So, hey, I noticed that you have a 4 bedroom, 2.5 bath in the MLS, fully remodeled, except the tax record says 3 bedroom, 1 bath. Was it permitted?
Okay, yeah.
Ah, right, so
Yeah.
those are things we want to know. So are there discrepancies between what the MLS says and the tax record says? The rest of the tax record, as you go down, what's important on the tax record is you want to maybe glance at the sale history. When did they buy it? How many times did they add people or take people away? I've seen it 100 times where they put it in a trust, they take it out of a trust, get married, they get divorced, right? All of those things. And really what we're also trying to size up is we're trying to size up how we're going to prepare the offer and more importantly, is there going to be any delays potentially, right? And then what's right underneath the sale history? It's the mortgage history. So it's not going to show us liens, but it's going to show us that maybe they bought the house 10 years ago, they got a loan 10 years ago, but they haven't done anything since. So I would assume they have a lower loan balance, right?
Mhm.
What if you saw on the loan balance, so the property's listed for $1 million, but you see a loan amount of $975,000?
Oh, they refinanced?
Huh?
Did they refinance?
Maybe,
Hold on a second.
I don't know, but there's a chance maybe they're underwater, I don't know.
Oh, for.
But what if it said $975,000 and then right next to it had another dollar FHA that closed at the same time? It's a reverse mortgage.
Oh, okay.
So there's a few little tricks, believe it or not. But I think the more time you spend looking before you write the offer at the tax record, the MLS, it's going to help you. Even if you do it before all of this, I think it'll help you with some of the questions you would ask the listing agent along the way. Kind of crazy, huh?
Yeah,
So, but remember, when you start to populate a purchase agreement, it's pulling information from the APN number. Right? So you just want to make sure there's no discrepancies. Produce a comparative market analysis that isn't always done when you work with buyers. I would say it's probably not done enough, if at all. Right? Your buyer is out looking at property. I've looked at 10 houses, they're between 950,000 and $1 million. I very rarely see buyer agents sit down with their buyers and review comps. Something you should consider, maybe, right? If
Some
you're-
buyers like to look at, they want the comps first before they even
Sure.
put in an offer.
Absolutely, right? And then 10 is obtain a seller disclosure statement and other needed documents, which I think is really hard to do. Unless the property listing agent is a little more sophisticated and they do like our verified product or something. Right, but that when they do that, so number 10, typically if the listing agent has that stuff, that'll be part of the supplements in the MLS. There'll be instructions in there as well.
Well, I'm sorry, what is the seller's disclosure statement?
So a requirement when you go into contract
Mhm.
is that the seller provide the buyer there's 2 different types of disclosures. So there's the TDS and an SPQ. And both of those forms is the seller disclosing to the buyer any material facts that they know about the property, anything that they've done or didn't do, that kind of stuff. So it's just nice to have that ahead of time, but it's very rare that that's done.
And Brendan said, I've never, like, in all of our personal transactions that always happen during escrow.
Yep.
So has that ever happened before? Because it seems like with fiduciary, like as a seller's agent with fiduciary and the seller. I don't know, is that something that's ever done before you decide on the?
We do it on all
price
our
for-
listings. Yeah, so we have a product, we branded called Verify. And so before we go to market on any of our listings, all the inspections are done, all the disclosures are done, the title report's done, HOA docs ordered, everything's ready. Because what we don't want to do is go under contract with the buyer for them to find out things later and then they cancel.
Change the, ask for a while.
Whatever, yeah, exactly, whatever it is. So what's interesting about what you're saying is most sellers want to sell as is.
They don't wanna do repairs and stuff.
Do you guys know what the as is clause really means?
Nothing.
Well, it does. What the as is clause really means is that the day they went under contract, whatever the physical condition of the property is, the seller has to deliver it in the same condition. That's what it really means.
Okay.
But when you have a contingency for physical inspections and disclosures and all that, the door is still open to renegotiate. So even though the intention is to sell it as is,
Yeah.
the right words to use is the seller will do no repairs, no credits, no warranties, and no price reduction. That's the right way. But not everybody does the right way, so. All right, so these are things, right? Here's your little checklist.
Brendan, my understanding is that even if it says as is, the buyer still has the right to ask for these things, and if they don't, they have the right to get their.
So if the buyer finds things
Yeah.
during their discovery.
That is just, yeah,
They can just walk away. But they still get their
they can
deposit.
still ask them to.
They can still ask, the seller can still say no, there's a whole, that's what we're gonna get to next.
Oh,
This is just how do we get ready to write the offer? What do we want to prepare, right? So to your point. So pretend I'm the buyer, we just found all those out, now I'm ready for you to write the offer, how could you better prepare me for that stuff? How do you set expectations? Knowing exactly what you just described.
With the buyer? That's what yours is, the buyer?
So
Yeah, and if it's as is, or if it just.
it doesn't even really matter. It's, let's just say I'm the listing agent, I said, well, I just want you to know the seller's selling it as is. Now what do you say to the buyer?
I'm gonna, based on what you just told me right now, I would say, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I want you to know that the property in the MLS is listed and the MLS as is. The client is telling, the seller's agent's telling me that the seller's going to sell it as is. We can, what that means is that the seller is going to deliver the house as it is right now. And he may not want to do any repairs, or ask for repairs, that may be a red flag. And so do you still want to continue with this project?
Okay, you're on the right path, yeah. So in addition, so rather than saying you want to continue. In addition, what I want you to know is that we have protection. Because we're going to be asking for X amount of days to do our due diligence, our inspections, so that protects your deposit if they accept our offer. But it also opens the door if we find things, even though the seller wants to sell it as is, if we find things to renegotiate those things if they're important to you.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're totally on the right track, but back to the process. This is how important it is to know the next steps, because those are the things that are gonna help you navigate the
Yeah.
conversation. Right, what were those books called? You know, you read 13 pages and then it said, if you wanna jump off the cliff, turn to page 42, if you wanna go marry the girl, turn to page 16, what were those? You remember those books in school? What the heck were those books called?
It's a long time ago.
Oh, well, thanks, I appreciate that. They were like, the story would change depending on what you wanted to do. Yeah, anyway. Okay,
Story.
it's not really a story, it's
Was that in the eighties?
probably.
Was it Cliff Notes? Not Cliff Notes.
I don't know, they weren't- it was- I can't remember now. Okay, so some ahas, what did you learn?
I learned how to prepare an offer. So
Some things you need to do before you write the offer.
I think that was big too.
Yeah,
Or,
build report.
yeah,
I mean, it's all like, what are we getting into
Yeah.
before we write? the
right,
offer?
Yeah.
Is there, do we feel good enough
yeah.
to write the offer? Right? Those are really important things to consider. And I'm telling you that when you're new, you just wanna go. The buyer, let's just say the buyer's got a really strong personality, like, I don't wanna wait,
Yeah.
let's just get that thing over to me, let's get it submitted. And you might do that,
Yeah,
just be prepared
yeah,
that you probably didn't get enough information and I don't know. You don't want it to backfire. What if
Branden,
it's 9 o'clock at night?
he still wants you to
You still want it, right? What do you do?
submit it.
You gotta.
yeah,
I was working with the buyer, I've never done anything, put a contract on them together, and he wanted me to submit an offer as we're looking at the house.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
I've done that. I've written offers on napkins.
And he put you on the spot, man.
So
Yes.
sometimes it's hard to say no. Yeah, don't have a fear. You know, that's, I think, the biggest thing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the offer itself. So what's the code name for our contract?
purchase agreement.
So residential purchase
Purchase
agreement. So the RPA, is the most common thing you're gonna hear. Do you have other versions of a purchase agreement? Do. You have a special one if there is a notice of default filed. Ah. There is a special one for what else? Income properties. All right, 2 to 4 units. Yeah, anyway, all right. So what do we really want to know? Well, it's the number one always is price. So we get that. It's priced at $1 million. That's the asking price. So the RPA purchase price is different than the asking price sometimes, right? So this is that sometimes awkward conversation you're gonna have with a buyer. So it's listed for $1 million, they wanna write it off for 900,000, feel really good about it. Okay. Terms, what kind of terms do we have in our contract?
How many day escrow, 30-day
All
escrow?
right, so let's go one at a time. How many days till close of escrow? Is there a magic number?
30,
Why?
is that?
Because you've been told that, there's no
but-
method.
No, it could be
No,
2
nothing.
days.
It
That's what
depends on if they have their loan approvals or whatever.
So back to those questions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and that's again, you might have a buyer who has direct underwriting approval and they can close in 21 days and you want to present that. But the seller has crap everywhere and there's no way that's gonna get cleaned up, right? Whatever. Okay,
Or they have all cash offer,
sure.
yeah.
Okay, so close of escrow date, what else? Terms,
When are you going to do inspections?
okay? So when you get good at this, you follow the RPA in order. So that's where I ultimately want you to go. Because you can, it's easier to fill out the contract when you go in order and when you start asking questions to your buyer. So the purchase price is one, the next thing is, on the list. The deposit. So how much deposit do you need to get?
3%.
Is there a rule?
No,
There is not.
could be 1%.
So why, it could be 1%, it could be $1. It could be the whole purchase amount.
Yeah.
So why do we use 3%? What's the rule? You have one? You have it? Is that the next one? Four, three, four.
Is there another one?
Oh, they did move it up, thank you. What's the next one? Good. Expiration of offer, perfect, thank you. Can I borrow this?
Sure. That's
Sure.
what, is there another one?
I
I'm trying to like study the ones that's the latest
I
one.
think this is the latest one.
I found like
only-
the latest one. Is there quite a few? It has to be, or it's a mess up here. I got it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right. So I'll lean on you. So close of escrow date, Amy was right. So that can be negotiated, right, depending on the scenario. And then the next one is
The expiration
expiration of the
of
contract, and by default, that's how many days?
3 calendar days after a fall buyer's.
Right, so today's October 3rd, you have to get an offer submitted by 5 o'clock today, right? But the seller's not looking at it until October 10th. So what should you do there?
With the,
Or
Right, so that's a great, perfect, this is a great segue. So if the contract expires by default 3 days and you don't change it, could that put your offer in jeopardy if you don't extend it? No, it's just, right? And that's an example of how you're making it easier for the listing agent. Because now the listing agent doesn't have to ask for an extension, you don't have to ask for an extension, right? We take care of it, right? Johnny on the spot. Okay, Karina, what's underneath that?
the initial deposit amount.
Okay, so now we're on the deposit. So why do we encourage 3%?
I think it's because if the seller, if the seller were to keep the property, they have up to 3%.
So it's our arbitration clause. So if there is a dispute about anything, the maximum amount of money that can be disputed is 3% of the purchase. So that's why we use that as kind of a rule of thumb. So that's the standard, it's common, don't overthink it.
Say it again, please.
So because of our arbitration and mediation clause, so when the buyer and the seller both have to agree to it, but basically, the most money that can be disputed or argued over is 3% of the purchase price. That's why we typically use 3%, that's the rule. But it can be any amount as far as the deposit. What else is under the deposit in addition to the deposit?
After the initial deposit.
Yeah, after the initial deposit is what?
Increased. deposit.
Increased deposit. So what would that mean?
That it's money placed into escrow after the initial deposit is, you use another form.
Right. So what that would look like, an example of that is, I'm writing you an offer knowing that you haven't found your replacement property yet. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you $10,000 or 1% now. And I'll give you the additional 2% when you find the property and we can remove that contingency. Would be an example.
But you don't have to do that. You don't have to.
You don't have to,
protect that
no.
price.
No, but it's a creative way to stand out.
Is that a new?
Let's say you had a short sale listing.
Mhm.
What I would do is say, here's a $10,000 deposit, I'll give you the rest of the deposit after you get short sale approval. I'm not gonna tie up my buyer's money sitting in an account for 3 months while you're trying to figure out short sale. That would be another example of how to use that. Yeah, perfect. What's underneath that?
The loan amounts.
Loan amount?
And
So-
exactly what it is, the first interest rate.
Yeah.
and the points.
Yep. So as you get good at the RPA, that's what we're talking about terms. So the most common, right, terms are the close of escrow date, the deposit, the inspection period, what else? The loan, which is where you're at now, and the appraisal. Those are the most common, but there's a ton of holes in there. City reports, HOA docs, disclosures, all sorts of stuff that are gonna be part of writing the offer. So, again, I know you guys have a lot of things that are getting thrown at you, but this, the more educated you are on it, easier it is to have a conversation. The easier it is to plan and prepare because you know what's coming, right? Sellers disclosures, again, we just talked about that. Typically, they're not available when you're writing an offer. Conveyances, what does conveyances mean? Kind of a tricky one. Not used very often when you're writing an offer.
Isn't that like the transfer of title or something? Conveying?
It could be, yeah, so it's how you're taking title.
Oh, how are you doing?
Yeah, so we don't do that here in the state of California. But in other states, when you're writing a contract, you're asking the buyer, how do you want to take title? Joint tenants, tenancy in common, all of these other things. So we don't have to worry about that here. Earnest money, we talked about due diligence inspection periods, we talked about that. So remember, your contract has default days. It's up to you to make changes to those days, or that could be part of the counter offers. Time for acceptance, we talked about that. Financing terms, we were just there. So fortunately, it does the math for you. So how do you get the loan amount?
You take the down payment from the total price.
Or if you have the right pre-approval letter from the lender, it'll have that information there for you. Yeah, so you can do it either way. If I'm putting 20% down
Yeah,
on $1 million home, that means I'm putting $200,000 down, that loan amount, right, is $800,000. So, financing terms, it gets a little bit more specific. Is it FHA, is it VA, right? All of that good stuff. Buyer pre-approval letter, we talked a little bit about that. Closing date, we talked about that. There's a section in there for home warranty. You want to include a home warranty. I don't want to speak for Simon, but I'm pretty confident about that. I would include a home warranty on every transaction moving forward, regardless of who pays for it. So if you can include a home warranty and get the seller to pay for it, great.
Right.
If you can't, have the buyer pay for it. If they can't, that's your closing gift. Okay?
It's only about 500, right?
Either way, it doesn't,
Yeah.
it's, again, we've been through this rodeo. I can tell you that your deductible changes on your, insurance policy if you don't have a warranty. So I would go out of my way to make that
and
happen.
now, isn't it, insurance is the hard thing to get now for California, right?
So that's also in our contract,
Insurance,
right,
yeah.
which is not here.
Yeah.
So
that's the
absolutely.
hard thing to get now.
So repairs, the only way you're gonna put repairs in an offer is if you're completely already aware of it.
Yeah.
All right, so if you know it needs a roof, or if the listing agent said the seller knows it needs a roof and here's an estimate, that's where you would include it in your offer. All right, so, but I would recommend not doing that in your initial offer. I would do that after you get your inspections done, right? But understanding the repair limits of your borrower is extremely important. Meaning what are they willing to do or not do on their own,
And
right?
maybe they'll give you credit for the roof or something like that, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Number 12 is special clauses. So those could be things like well, no, I think we have city report now in here. I'm just trying to think what else it would have. Well, there's so many things now in here. So not too many things to worry about there on special clauses.
What would be an example of a special clause?
So a special clause would be like a 9A report, city report, or a fire hazard zone or a flood hazard, but all that's now covered with the NHDs and everything. That's all part of our contract. So not too many things there. The other thing, Jewel, would be probably more like on special assessments. So some areas get special assessments, maybe they had a school bond or they had a road assessment and it's being paid off in the taxes. So knowing that. 13 addenda would be specific to probably your brokerage more than anything. And so some brokers have different or additional paperwork that they need signed. So as an example, disclosure of affiliated businesses. Some brokerages have a requirement on their listing site, so that might be part of the supplements, but getting that ahead of time. So writing the offer right is making sure you have all of this information before you start doing it. So one of the other reasons this is really important to know this process is because you can, but it's not recommended that it's 8:30 at night, the buyer wants you to write this offer, you have the main points. You know what the price is, they talked about the closing, they agree to the, the deposit. Then you start putting the contract together, and by the time you get to it, now it's 9 o'clock, and how many times do you have to go back and forth now with the buyer on things that you asked? So it's important that you maybe have a printout like this as your guide, to say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I want to make sure this is as clean as possible, I'm not missing anything.
Right.
And you could just go through that with them on the phone or at the bar or wherever you're at, and just go, hey, we need to fill in these blanks, what do you want to do?
Oh, yeah, the bottom one, avoid rookie agent mistakes.
Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so then you want to review it before they sign it. There's nothing, I mean, it's good or bad, but you know, we've had, I remember when I was new, my buyers would catch things and go, hey, I noticed this was missing or this is incorrect, and it's great if they have patience. Some of them don't.
Yeah,
It can be embarrassing. So
right,
be sure your buyer understands the contract. Which is why you typically want to set it ahead of time. Listen, I know you want to get the offer in, but I want to make sure you have time to review it,
yeah,
right? So that's a good thing. Make sure everything's on the same page. Essential in your area, whatever common terms, most of that is boilerplate we have, so not too much to worry about there. It's sometimes it's hard to do because we want to go. You know, the reason I was asking, what do you do at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night? You know, I don't know the chances that the listing agent, even if you send it at 9:30, is gonna look at it. I don't know, they might. Right, so it's back to just,
so you would just tell them, oh, let's do it in the morning, right?
no,
No,
not necessarily. You know, any opportunity I get, and you need to get somebody committed to sign something,
Yeah.
I want it done. I just don't want people waking up in the morning going,
maybe I change my mind.
yeah, I want a little bit more of a commitment, so.
So, Brenda,
Yeah.
with DocuSign now and like 9 o'clock at night, what is a good practice and how long the purchase agreement is? What is the practice of, do you just get on the phone with your buyer since you're most likely not in person and go over it? And what do you do?
It's so situational. If you've got a buyer who's just so excited, they want to make sure before they go to sleep, they know you submitted the offer. Then they're probably gonna be awake and they're gonna be excited to DocuSign it, right? So that's why it's really important that you are thoroughly on the same page about making sure everything's filled in accurately, so that they have some peace of mind. Right, and then you're gonna have people who are like, you know, get it over to me. And they genuinely want, right, they're putting pressure on you to get it over to them, and then they still don't sign it till the morning. So it's always hit or miss, but it's up to us to set the expectation. And that can be the hardest thing to do when you're newer, because you're not, you want to do what you're being told,
Yeah.
right? So, and I don't know if you're going, are you asking me about the times and the dates and all that, and if it's at 9:30 at night, where does the clock start ticking?
It's really, it's like the bullet point saying, make sure your buyer understands the contract, right? And the long contract,
It is.
you know, so
So
you're
let's-
gonna get an oversight with DocuSign. If DocuSign goes quick, next, you know, it's 9 at night.
So let's play devil's advocate. So can you make changes to it in the morning?
After
See, we're just getting the offer signed. We haven't presented it,
So they
right? So you have time to make corrections if you need to. And they can still change their mind in the morning, right? And so it's all in saying, listen, it's 9 o'clock at night. I know we rushed to get all this over to you. I still want you to look at it. We're not gonna be able, the seller's not gonna make a decision tonight anyway. So even if we have to make some changes in the morning, we can still do that. It's just however the conversation is going. Some people.
It depends also on the buyer. He's well property, because I had a client just like that. He just wanted to like send the paper. out. He didn't want me to go over it, nothing. He just wanted to sign and get that
A lot
offer.
of
because
buyers
it was
are that
about-
way. So where I was ultimately going with this is you have protection. Right, you still don't have the seller that signed it. Right, so even if the seller did sign it, you still have contingencies, so there's still things in place for you to protect the buyer and yourself. Right? there are teams out there, we're not one of them. That, they let the buyer know that they're not gonna submit the offer until they sign off that they've read it. That can be good or bad for some buyers, right? Some buyers might feel like, dude, that's a little too aggressive for me. So it's super situation.
Just the DocuSign as well, right now, but the reality is. I am really sitting down with the buyer and going over it section by section, making sure they told, or is it just, you're asking them to. Let them please read this over
Yeah, so
and let me know if you have any questions, like what's the reality of it now? That from your practice.
the reality of it is they're still protected, even if they don't read everything. The contract is designed to have their best interest in mind, so I have faith in that. You're in a tough situation because you're not supposed to be an attorney, but you have to be able to explain the contract.
Right.
Right, so, I think if Jewel was a first-time buyer and you're still looking at houses. I think for the best experience for her and for you to show value is to send her a copy of the contract to start reading. You've at least demonstrated to her, you want her to have a good understanding before you ask her to sign anything. And if she chooses to not read any of it, at least you covered your bases by offering it. There are services out there like Glide. Glide is a service that's tied into Zip Forms and Car, where there's actually some interaction that can happen with your clients when it comes to but you can highlight things, you can point things out, they can take notes. Right, you know, maybe you have somebody that is a night owl and you're not, and they're at 1 o'clock in the morning, they have questions, but you're asleep. Glide is a resource where they can take notes and point things out, right? So there's some technology out there that can help make sure people are reading things, but you'd be surprised how many people don't. And it's even crazier when they go to sign their loan docs. There's way more pages of initialing and stuff on loan docs, I guarantee you they don't read through that.
Even if they read it, they probably don't understand it.
It's totally 100%, right?
They're made by attorneys, attorney language.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like 20 pages
So-
of loan
You
docs.
kind of, you're not given time to read it.
You have E&O insurance, don't worry.
So you're not given time, to, like, there's no time to actually read
Right.
what you're saying, it's like, sign here, sign here,
And
sign
and
here.
the
and
importance of
it's
you
literally a
learning,
book, so,
learning the contract,
Yeah,
that'll give you some of that peace of mind. Like some of what you're asking me, you'll answer your own question and you get really good at the contract, because you know what everyone's agreeing to and you know where the protection. Yep.
and it's not like every section is going to pertain to your exact
Scenario,
transaction,
yep.
so it's just, there are quite a few that are
Right.
very important, and the rest are only specific transactions. that you
And you bring up a really good point too, because in the RPA, there are certain places that if you check the box, it populates another. So, you know, being aware of all of those things, right? So what does the agency talk about? What does the buyer advisory talk about? Like all those things are designed to be able to protect you too, and say to the buyer, well, I asked you to sign this and read this. So I don't know if that's fair practice. Fair practice is making sure they understand what it is they're signing, right? Okay, now we gotta present this thing. So, were all the i's dotted and the t's crossed? When you're new to real estate, new to the contract, yeah, you were up till 9 o'clock. Like getting it put together, yeah, should you check it out and make sure? Should you have your mentor, productivity coach, somebody else put another set of eyes on it? Probably, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just the contract, all of the documents that are important for submitting. Pre-approval letter, proof of funds, love letter, anything, right, that's gonna be part of the package. Following the instructions, and again, not every listing agent has instructions. But making it as easy and convenient for them as possible goes a long way. something, right, like number 3, label all documents clearly. So, right, here's an interesting thing, and it sounds time consuming, and it is, but. So I just met the buyers at 9 o'clock last night, but I'm not docu-signing anything because they're sitting right in front of me. I'm gonna get wet signatures. Is that okay? 100%, right? So you're doing all of that. Now what do you gotta do after you have the wet signatures because you didn't docu-sign it? You gotta scan it in.
Oh, yes, yeah,
Yeah,
either fax.
So what happens after you scan it? It gives you a PDF that has some mumbo jumbo numbers and stuff. So back to labeling all the documents, how clearly do you want to present this to the listing agent? So if I have 5 different PDFs and they all have numbers,
Oh, yeah.
or do they say, you know, Branden Lowder RPA, Branden Lowder proof of funds, Branden Lowder, like make it easy for the listing agents, right? So labeling the documents. Order the documents or in order logically, right? You could even go as far as not just the labeling, but making sure whatever you label or whatever order they're in, they match the email. So what do I mean by that? A poor way to present an offer in an email is, here's my offer, let me know what you think. The right way to do it is to say, good evening,
Yeah.
this is so-and-so. I'm proud to present my buyer, Branden Lowder's offer. Here are the highlights, and you have bullet points. Offer, amount, highlights, whatever, attached, pre-approval letter, attached, proof of funds, attached love letter, whatever it is. You're giving me a summary and making my life a little easier, right? So if you send me the PDF attachments and they're all upside down, are you making my life any easier?
No.
That's the point I'm trying to make, right?
And
So.
you're gonna get irritated.
Yeah, right. So notifying the listing agent. So you're not just sending the email.
Yeah.
In the email, you should always end it with kindly confirm receipt. And then shoot a text. Just want you to know you should have my client's offer in your inbox. Please let me know what's missing, if anything. I'm here to help, right?
Mhm.
So notify the listing agent. Next step. This is the hardest. So here's some truth to command. So in command, we have a section called opportunities. How many of you have looked at opportunities?
yeah,
On command. So opportunities is where you keep track of your pipeline. All right, so this is where we're going to put our pipeline information. So I have 3 buyer agreements signed. I should be putting that in command. I have 3 listings. I should be putting that in command. The reason it's important for us, just so you know, is it's helping us get a gauge of what kind of production the office has with their agents as well. So the listing stuff is easy because you typically are not only having to submit your listing paperwork. On the buy side, we've never traditionally had to do that. So most of the time, working with buyers, we've never had a buyer rep agreement signed, and we've never put it into the command system. We really have never. And I will tell you as a buyer's agent, I shouldn't even be saying this, but I know it's being recorded. As a buyer's agent, it's a step I don't really care to take because if I'm writing offers and I'm not even sure if they're going to go through, I don't even want to put them in command. So when we represent buyers, the only time we ever got them into opportunities in command was after we got through the contingencies and we knew we had a deal. Now it's different because you should be putting them in there with your buyer representation agreement. So I just want you to know that kind of stuff should be in there. And then,
But Brendan, as another token, it could be seen in a different way where it could be a buyer's thing where the more of the buyer rep agreements, the more probabilities of you getting the contract closed.
100%, yeah.
So,
Do as
I
I
mean,
say,
you
not
see-
as I do.
Yeah.
Right? No, I like, there's a lot of value to do it, right? If you are relatively organized and you want, to have a good visual of the people that you're working on, the potential income you're gonna have.
That only works if you're doing it consistently.
Right. Yeah, totally. And then, staying in tune with your buyer. Want you to know I got the offer submitted, but it's probably sleeping. I'll check in with you tomorrow, whatever. Okay. So that is our present the offer checklist. Okay, what did you learn from that? A lot? Is it intimidating?
No,
Not, I would say intimidated, just.
it's
a
a
lot of
lot to
thinking.
process.
Yeah, it's a lot of thinking.
You wanna make sure
At
everything's
first,
correct.
yeah.
But like they said, like for us, though, too, for the first 3 transactions, they have somebody helping us, you know. So.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good security blanket, right? You know, to know you have support. Listen, you guys are, you shouldn't plan on this being easy.
No.
There'd be way more people doing it if it was easier. But if you look at this as you want to be a professional, how many professionals do you know who don't have to learn what it is they're doing to get at? It doesn't matter if you're a mechanic, it doesn't matter if you're a sports player, it doesn't matter, like, you have to have training to get there, and that just sometimes takes time and practice, right? So I know you're getting a lot thrown at you, it'll come to you, but if you just embrace, I want to be really good at negotiating, then that means I'm gonna learn the contract front and back. Right?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is this process, this whole process you just showed us, is it only for a specific type of property or is it for all one or properties?
It's pretty much the same on any
Um,
process.
So if we had, say, a buyer that was buying a property that was, he wanted to use it as an investment property, it would be the same RPA, would be the same, everything, almost the same,
Pretty much, yeah,
almost the same.
yeah, pretty much.
Wait, and what if it was like a repo, like a
RO.
REO or, yeah,
Same thing.
same thing, so this is generic for like, buying a property.
Yeah, we're gonna follow pretty much the same blueprint, no matter what the property is, no matter what contract we're using, pretty much gonna be the same. The key to me, so, you know, if it's a short sale or an REO property or an income property, like there's typically those listing agents have some direction or instructions that you're giving you. And again, back to the frustration, like of how bad you guys want the deal for your buyer. Well, as a listing agent, if I've given you all the instructions and you're clearly not following them, you're not doing your buyers any favor. So this is a good opportunity for you to just kind of take ownership of it, because once you do, it's like riding a bike. It really is. So even though the RPA changed, the elements are still there. Like I still know the elements, whether they changed order or not. And then, you know, again, that's to me, the most important thing you can offer your buyers is a good understanding of what all of this means, right?
Brandon, I have a specific question about the RPA.
Okay,
Um,
can it be multiple choice? Can you ask me a multiple?
it's not multiple choice, it's what you think personally. So you know how there's a box that states that, who pays for the city papers, whether it's the
City
seller or
report.
the buyer city report?
Uh-huh.
And I know it's only like $79 or something like that, but it's what's behind it, like, who's gonna take care of something if the property is in bad foundation or the city tells you? Cause I think because some cities require that you have a specific house that is like on a specific, you know, and if there's a problem, then whoever buys that paper has to fix that, if it's the buyer or the seller.
That's not.
Can you explain that? That was something that just kind of like threw me off. I was
So-
like, why is that so complicated?
So if I hear you correctly, you're saying whoever pays for the report is responsible for the problems?
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
that's how I understand it, and that's,
Yeah,
I'm not sure if I.
that's not true.
Okay,
Yeah. All we're trying to do in the contract is decide who's paying for what reports. And, you know, it's a good question, because typically in the contract, if your buyer is paying for anything, you also can request who the vendor's gonna be. But a common rule of thumb, common practice is we're always, as buyers agents, asking the seller to pay for everything, which makes it seller's choice of service.
Mhm.
So even the listing agents, if you were to try, and because we do this with our investors, we're trying to make the net bottom line better for the seller. So the buyer doesn't mind paying for title, the buyer doesn't mind paying for escrow.
Mhm.
But you know what, who gets butthurt? The listing agent gets butthurt because they promised their friend at the escrow company that they would get the escrow. So it's the wrong intentions, right, sometimes. So back to your question, if I were to say, in my offer, the buyer will pay for the report, the seller and listing agent are still responsible for ordering it, and it's still subject to your buyer approving everything in the report. So there's still protection.
Okay,
Yeah, so in the city of LA, they have what's called a 9A report. That's required before anything closes.
Mhm.
And that goes back to, remember when we were going through that checkpoint or the checklist where you're looking at the MLS, the tax record, there might be a discrepancy.
Yeah.
Well, there still could be the tax record and the MLS match. But the city inspector went out and said, yeah, but they converted the patio into a room and that's unpermitted and therefore they have to tear it down. Right? So that the buyer's not gonna be responsible for that regardless of who orders the report.
okay, okay. So the buyer's not assuming any responsibility if he decides to purchase it?
No, no. It's just it's a term or a condition that's negotiable in the contract, whoever's paying. So, for our investors, if they do volume, they get a break on title insurance or escrow because they do volume. So it's important for them to be able to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'd like to pay for this, but I want my buyer choice of services.
Mhm.
Now, most sellers are okay with that. It's the listing agents that are like, oh, no,
Do you have to specify that? If I buy,
no.
as if I,
If
if I.
you're checking the box, the buyer's gonna pay all of escrow fees, you have to specify who the escrow company is.
Oh,
gonna
and
be.
you specify the name of the store company.
And there's room in the RPA for labor. Right? But again, a listing agent might say, like Tammy, to be fair to the listing agent, Tammy might say, well, I appreciate that you want to pay for the escrow and use that escrow company. But I represent the seller, we're willing to pay for it because we want to know it's done correctly.
Okay.
There's like,
That's a
there's
couple $1,000s.
It could be, right? It could be, yeah. Okay, receive and review the offer checklist, make sure the offer is complete, confirm receipt of the offer, get offer to seller in a timely manner, especially if there's a time crunch. Create an executive summary. Yeah, that's not in my wheelhouse. I don't know what that means. right?
I think that's like the summary you talked about, like the main points of the,
Well, that's,
I know what an executive summary is.
well, I do too.
It's like a
But
one
I've,
page.
I've never seen that on a checklist in my life, but that's okay. But that could be, I think this is from the seller. Receive and review.
Yeah, because they're receiving.
So this is if I'm the listing agent.
Mhm.
Okay, my bad. All right, so let's go through this again. I'm the listing agent. Yes, I'm in receipt of your offer. I'm going to reply back to you and say, thank you, Mimi, for sending me this offer, right? I wish you could have done better.
Yeah.
Alright, So
Good luck to you. Yeah.
but step one is making sure it's there,
Yeah.
because I don't want to send her confirm of receipt if there's some things missing.
Missing, yeah.
Okay, right, so that's important. Getting the offer to the seller in a timely manner, right, well, that's totally dependent on whatever you and your seller agree to. There are scenarios where, let's say you're taking the listing. And the seller says, what do you recommend? You think we're gonna get more than one offer? Oh, there's a high probability. Okay, well, in that scenario, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, today is October 3rd. When would you like to review offers? Well, let's go Sunday by 5 p.m. Okay, that's great. Now, what do you want me to do, Miss? This is what this is saying. So the seller says, let's just wait, let the world know we're gonna review offers by Sunday at 5. So you have two things you can do now. Then you need the seller's permission. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if that's the case, are you okay that I hold all of these offers until that point before I submit them to you? Or would you like me to submit them to you one at a time?
As soon as we get them.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So as long as you have an agreement with the seller on how you're gonna do that, that's what number 3 really means. Now I understand we're creating an executive summary. So let's just say that we decided to wait till Sunday to get as many offers as we possibly can. And let's say we have 5 offers.
Okay.
So in command, you have the ability to do this, where you put all of the main points of the offers in there, and it'll create a summary. that you can give to your seller. So Tammy does this with an Excel spreadsheet. It's the same thing. So what you probably don't want to do, let's say you have 10 offers. You probably don't want to take those 10 offer packages and submit those to the sellers and let them review each one. Does that make sense? That's a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
So what the summary does is it takes the key points of each offer and it shows it like on a spreadsheet to where the seller can go, Branden Lowder, $1 million, right? And it just breaks everything down so that you can review it collectively with the seller without having to go through each page of the contract. That's what the executive says. My bad. Call the buyer's agent. Could be a lot of different reasons. You could also be acknowledging receipt and I got your offer. But more importantly, it's probably trying to give them some kind of an update, right? Call the lender. I like that, if allowed in your area. So as the listing agent, I received your offer, I reviewed it, I noticed that they're getting financing. I noticed that the lender is Bob over at Wells Fargo. What we're basically saying here is you want to make sure before the seller likes it enough, the offer, you want to make sure that you've talked to the lender and you have a good understanding about the buyer, the borrower, and how far along they are in the process. So what Tammy typically does on her listings is she says, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I want you to know we're going to be collecting offers, but I also want you to know before I submit them to you, I'm going to be calling their lenders specifically before I send it to you because I want to make sure that it's a legit offer, right? Number 7, create an outline document to reference when you call the sellers. That's kind of all we said. Okay. So my apologies, I thought I was still on the buyer side. So here's the opportunities in command. This is where you can kind of create your pipeline. It sets notifications. It'll show you just kind of, a snapshot of what you potentially have going on, especially after you get into escrow, after you get an offer accepted. This will track it all the way. And if you don't already know this by now, if you get a successful closing, the only way you're going to get paid is if in command, everything's approved. So we have a compliance department that approves things. But if you have a transaction coordinator, as an example, they make sure everything's gone through appropriately. You have what's called a DA, which is a disbursement of commission. And that's kind of like your breakdown of how the gross commission is, paid out. So a lot of that stuff will be in there for you as well, right? Because you guys all, $1 million, 2.5%, like 25 grand. Yeah, well, that's not actually what you take home.
Yeah.
Right?
Because it goes to the brokerage. It goes-
Whatever,
Yeah.
Some people don't use command, so.
Well, they all use command at Color Edge if they want to get paid. They just might not use command for their CRM. Everybody uses opportunities in command because that's the only way we get paid. Yes. So you're absolutely right. Not everybody uses command as a CRM and maybe they don't use designs. I don't, I use Canva, right? I mean, so, but to get paid, yep, I use command. I don't know very well. Tammy knows. She's the one that manages that for us. So yeah, good stuff there. Okay, so back to the process, right? So there are things that can get in the way of the process, especially if you don't know what the next steps are. So regardless of where we are here, the next phase probably is here. Yep. This is the decision-making process. So what does it mean? Well, I did a really good job of writing the offer as clean as I possibly could. I had a good understanding from the listing agent of what was important to the seller. So I got to this place that I thought, man, it would be great if they accepted the offer. But they didn't for some reason. We don't know necessarily why at this point. But maybe the listing agent called you up and said, hey, that was the cleanest offer I've ever gotten, but I want you to know there's a couple things that the seller needs to counter. And you might be good with it, you might not. It might not have anything to do with the price. It might have to do with the fact that they need 15 more days to close an escrow instead of the 30 that you put in there, right? You don't know until you get it. It's good to get a counter offer because it still means the door is open for negotiation. Now, if they accept it, that's even better. You can still go from counters, you could counter 20 times and still get here. So don't overthink it about being too clean, right? You want to get to a place where the offer has been accepted, including any back and forth counter offers. Now, who's responsible after the offer is accepted of opening escrow?
The buyer.
The listing agent. The listing agent is gonna be more responsible for opening escrow. Right, so now we're gonna begin the contract close process. So now, what's really, really, really important, if you represent the buyer, is to have a good understanding of the next steps for the buyer as well as the timeframes. So what is the buyer gonna be responsible for doing next? The first thing, you need the escrow information and the contact for the escrow company so that they can get their deposit in. That's a big step. Money has to be in, right? There are some listing agents who won't let your buyer start any inspections without making sure that the deposit is in.
Because that's what commits them to the property.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what makes the contract work, the black and white ink that it's
Yeah,
on.
because otherwise they could, if the money's not there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we gotta have the money in. So the next step for the buyer is you've gotta get the money in. Then we gotta schedule our inspections. Right? So we got inspections, however many that they're gonna be. We need to make sure that we're communicating with the lender and getting copies of the contract to the lender, because what does the lender need to start doing?
Funding.
Well, they can't fund.
They're
not
They
funding.
What-
pay you.
No, what's the next step for the lender?
Yeah. Underwriting.
What do they need to order?
Loan documents.
No,
Approval.
no, appraisal.
Appraisal.
Oh, yeah.
It's the very next thing. So again, and I'm not knocking any of it, or not all wrong answers, but I'm just simply saying, I want to know the next steps. How can I keep a fire lit under my buyer's butt to make sure that we're meeting our deadlines? Right? So let's just say during the original offer, we asked for 15 days on appraisal. And they countered back and said, no, you have 5. And you agreed to it. The lender better be ordering, right? So it's just that kind of stuff. On the seller side, they need to make sure that they're coordinating with you those inspections in those days, and to make sure that somebody can get into the house for those inspections in those days. What else does the seller need to be accomplishing? Those disclosures, those HOA docs, all those things that you agreed to, the seller has some responsibility to make sure they're getting it to the buyer, right? What would happen if the seller rejects it?
Rejects what?
Your offer?
See why he rejected.
Then you could.
What's the next step with the buyer?
Could they,
Cry, go to the bar,
yeah,
get a massage?
could they redo the off?
Fire you for
Shoot,
not
you
getting
could
this
rewrite it
property.
off. Did you lose a little leverage maybe?
Yeah,
Okay, right, so you
You can
could.
rewrite the offer?
Sure,
You can
write
rewrite
another
the
offer.
Nobody ever said.
Hey, it's listed for $1 million, you wrote it for $950. We said no.
and rewrite it.
To write another.
So write another, yeah, write it for $940 and see if that works. No, but that's a possibility, but the most common possibility, the most common thing is what?
They go find us
We're
somewhere.
gonna go look at
In
another
that
house.
house, yeah.
So,
Can you tell your buyer, we can write as a strategy, we can rewrite the offer if you really want to, write another offer. if you really want this house?
Yeah, and then
Sure.
I'd do it for asking price.
not recommended.
Not recommended? He's,
What's recommended is that you have those conversations before you.
oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what's. And that's a whole nother class. I know, you guys just could be full-time students.
This is a full time.
It's
This is like,
all-
a-
No, but at some point, you should be up here doing this,
Yeah.
that's all. Okay, so that's kind of, what are we doing, next steps, reaching the decision. All right, this is all this other stuff. Oh, there's a role play. Okay. Recaps and ahas. Okay. I'm good with any of this. Amy, do you have any questions? How many of you are doing this? Daily success system. Right?
Yeah.
Right, not an easy thing to do, kids. even us folks that are seasoned have a hard time doing all this, so. Don't feel like you're all alone, don't feel like it's. It is what it is, right? We all have to find our little niches and work towards this stuff, so. All right, well, let's share some ahas. Can't leave until you do. Amy, I'll start with you.
I like the, being communicative to the other listing agents and getting a good rapport with them. And so,
Not an easy thing to do
No.
sometimes,
No.
but I think you have to make it happen. You have to be able to tell yourself,
yeah,
I tried.
yeah.
That,
And you-
that to me means you're doing a good job.
Right, and if you break the ice and if you find things in common with the other agent, because you both wanna make the deal work, so you're both in a win-win. Yeah.
What's your problem? Why don't you answer your phone?
Right.
Right, that's a good idea. Okay. What
No,
else?
the answer like this, yes, can I help you?
Yeah.
Oh my God. You screaming at me.
Are you guys aren't supposed to sign in.
No.
Ollie, what do you think? Give me a couple
I think
things.
I would just go back to like learning the contract, and
Yeah.
that's gonna make the steps easier.
I think so. I
Yeah.
think, it's easier to answer questions, it's easier to plan, it's easier to make sure you're not. Maybe even. Maybe you're not working with the right buyer,
Right.
that's what's kind of crazy. What did you learn, about the buyer rep agreement? Was it easier to get somebody to sign it because you know how to explain it?
Yeah.
That's all.
The step.
Right.
I mean, obviously everybody has a different personality, but
Yeah,
when you're able to like explain them,
Yeah.
Because he's got some signs already,
yeah, which is awesome. Yeah.
Was he okay with paying you if the seller doesn't agree with him? Was he okay with?
Well, that's another one.
Oh,
Yeah, that one I'm still working on.
Oh.
That one.
he's been trying to get the guy to sign for about
Yeah.
2 weeks now. He hasn't
Yeah.
signed.
So did you ask him if it's okay for you to sign for him?
Just crack a joke.
Yeah.
That's how I roll. You want me to sign for it? I'll take care of it.
Yeah.
Dude, I don't have a problem, just messing with people.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
all. And I'm not recommending it for everyone.
No, I know, I joke around. I think that's like the first thing I told Jojo, she's like, you're very serious, and like,
If you can get people to laugh though, that's huge.
not that you don't know me yet.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I think it's important that you.
Yeah,
You go out of your way to try at least, to
Yeah.
figure that out. And remember that, you're dealing with people and people have life circumstances, and there's other reasons why people might behave the way they do, whatever. Just, you can do it without judgment, it's a lot better.
I think another one is just not overthinking things, you can prepare as much as you can, but
Overthinkers. I know.
but just take action, and you're gonna fail, but you'll learn through that process.
I don't know if I've shared this story with you or not, but we have a business partner, he's in Florida, his name's Tony Martinez. And, we do a lot of, he has a training company as well. And we do a lot of business conversation. And I'll never forget one day we were trying to do some, business planning, having some conversation around things. And he interrupts me on the Zoom. He says, Brandon, you guys wanna know what the difference between you and I is? And I was like, what's that, Tony? He goes, you're Apple and I'm Microsoft. And I was like, what does that mean? He goes, you want everything shiny and bright and perfect before you roll it out. He goes, I just fix it along the way. Which is true,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I'm a Mac man. I have never had a problem with any of my computers ever.
Yeah.
And every time I get on a PC, man, it's like constantly updating something or whatever.
Fixing.
But that's,
Yeah,
that was that plan.
yeah,
So I understand, trying to make sure you own it. I would just say that I think most people you're gonna do business with don't necessarily care. I mean, they care, but like, it's not in the way of them wanting to do real estate business. So sometimes, yeah, you can overthink it a little bit. It's okay, because sometimes we need that. It's not that we're overthinking it, we just wanna have a certain level of confidence. before we
yeah, I
apply.
think you should have a certain level of preparation, but at the end of the day, you should just take action.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the same with door knocking.
Yeah,
You don't really have to have a plan, you just have to be okay talking to people.
People.
exactly, and then just get in the face of
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah, so, the best way to door knock a neighborhood with older people?
Yeah.
When they answer, you go.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Well, you're thinking of-
That's a program. I just wanna make sure you guys are paying attention,
And then you give them a heart attack.
I know.
That's the whole.
That's all I did, the sign here, I call the ambulance.
Yeah.
Couple takeaways.
A great way to word the email to the, when you're writing an offer.
Yeah.
Right, keep that summary.
Yeah.
Succinct and organized and, you know, make sure
Yeah.
everything is.
Yeah.
Dotted and crossed and.
Yeah.
As easy as possible for the other
Right,
agents,
right,
so
exactly.
they have a nice clean up.
And even from an organizational perspective, let's just say, you did separate all this stuff, right? Even on your desktop in a file for Branden Lowder or whatever, right? It's inevitable, your escrow company, your title company, the lender, somebody's gonna ask you for something specific.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want is all this in one PDF, and you're trying to figure out how to find it, right? So, good one. What else? Anything else?
I think the structure of setting the buyer offer
Okay,
and
checklist, you
the
mean?
check, the whole, all those steps. It was like putting a bicycle together, you know, all the points, you know, you want to put the, you know, you want the bicycle, but you don't put
Yeah.
the bicycle
Yeah.
parts together. So
Getting clarity.
getting clarity on what goes where, so you can get to the next
Right.
house.
And it's gonna be inevitable if you start filling out a contract. And you're gonna go, oh shoot, I forgot to ask, oh shoot, I forgot to ask, well, like, it's okay. But what I'm saying is. Even as a newer agent, and I said, hey, I wanna write this contract,
Yeah.
you should be okay saying, Brandon, I hear you. I need you to be okay that I might have to come back 3 or 4 times and ask you some questions.
I think we're okay with that. Yeah. I mean, I just told them ahead of time, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, I might be calling you later on to ask me more questions.
And
Yeah.
This is a good business to be in, it is very fulfilling. There's always something more, you know, I learn every day. But I'm intentional about it. I think that's, you know, something I've noticed with, especially I would say. 2018-ish, 2019-ish. They're so, real estate's so in everybody's face. So the biggest change for me is now I know when I talk to somebody, regardless of buyer, seller or not. They have some opinion or comment about real estate.
Yeah, like you're saying in the class and negotiate, tell me one thing and one thing you love and hate about really.
That's my icebreaker.
Yeah.
You know, the other question I ask people all the time now, so when it comes to real estate, who do you pay attention to? Who do you follow? Where do you get your news?
Yeah.
Right? Because those people that are getting their info, it changes how they think about things, feel about things. I just want to be prepared. Right? This is an important step, right? Is your presentation can mean a lot. And if your buyer really wants the house and there's multiple offers and it's competitive, like you have to be just as competitive, right?
So, question, Brandon,
Huh?
can the seller counteract a few offers at a time? Can say I'm the seller's agent and you're the seller and your seller likes 3 different offers?
Yeah, back up.
Can you counter 3 different offers at the same time, or are you only countering 1 at a time? So you have 10 buyers and like 3 of them,
Counter each of them independently.
like at different
So
times?
they only get. well,
At a
at
different
time.
Like you can't counter 3 different offers at the same time, say on Tuesday,
True.
he saw the offers on Tuesday and he liked 3 of the properties, he liked 3 of the offers, he wants to counter all those 3 offers at the same day.
Yeah.
Can he do that?
Uh-huh.
But independently, of course.
You can. So some,
And then wouldn't that be a bidding war?
it depends on how it's set up. So I'll give you an example. So the right way to do it, if I'm a listing agent and all 4 of you submitted an offer, I'm gonna counter all 4 of you. I can do it one of 2 ways. I can send each of you the same multiple counter offer. Maybe it's highest and best, whatever it is. And it's still gonna be up to my seller. If you respond, all of you, it's still up to my seller to pick. So it's not first come, first serve, it doesn't work that way. The other option is, to your point, I can send each of you your own counter offer, but it still has to be on a multiple counter form.
Oh, so
I
we
still
know
have
it's
to
multiple.
disclose to you, your buyers, that there are other offers, but I'm specifically giving you the terms because of whatever reason.
So the way I know you're covering other offers is because you sent me a multiple counter offer.
Right.
Not a counter offer. It's gonna say multiple counter offer.
Yeah, it's unethical for us to send you a counter offer with multiple offers. It has to be a multiple counter offer.
But it doesn't have to be like 3 people to get it. I mean, it's completely separate offers. Completely separate.
Yeah, as long as you're using the multiple offer form.
So I, as a buyer, know, what if I accept the offer and the other person accepts the other, what do you do?
No, it's multiple.
Well, you still have, the seller still has to sign and
Oh, okay.
acknowledge. So the door is still open for someone else to slip in.
So if I signed the counter offer, it doesn't mean you're gonna accept it unless you sign it, and that's.
So a counter offer is different than a multiple counter. So it still has to be acknowledged.
The multiple counter offers, so, but not the counter offer.
No, it still has to be acknowledged.
Well,
Both of them still have to be acknowledged by the seller. It's just, you know, whether you're the only person negotiating or not with a regular counter offer.
mhm.
With a regular counter offer, you should have some peace of mind. You're not having to worry about anybody else. But with a multiple counter offer, that's why you need to clarify with the listing agent. So if it's the highest and best, most listing agents send the same multiple counter offer to everybody. But that doesn't mean you have to. So you might like, so say you submit your offer and your borrower is using Wells Fargo. And that's a bank we just don't like to do. So we might counter it out only on yours because nobody else is using Wells Fargo. That would mean it's. Because if I can't just counter out Wells Fargo to everybody if they're not using it. Does that make sense? So it depends on the situation. But yeah, good question. Okay, kids. How fun was that?
That was
Signing.
great. And then you have backup offers too, like, if the seller, buyers, not conforming,
Yeah.
they have backup offers.
Yeah. Well, that's a start. Oh, that was, what was this do? Oh, I'm sure. Now, I just gotta figure out where's Zoom? See, this is a PC. I don't even know how to use the PC.